Hello and welcome. I'm Barbara O'Neill. Today we're diving into reversing diabetes. We'll discuss how reducing high glycemic index foods and embracing a low-carb diet can help manage and potentially reverse diabetes. We'll also touch on the benefits of high-intensity interval training for improving metabolic health. Join us as we uncover practical strategies to take control of your health and work towards reversing diabetes.
To understand diabetes, we need to have a look at what are the main causes of diabetes. So what would be the main causes of diabetes? Well, Hippocrates, he's the father of medicine, that's 400 years BC, no mention of diabetes in his writings. And then the little book Sugar Blues by William Dufty, he gives a very interesting history of sugar. And he shows that there was no diabetes until sugar was well established. There's nothing wrong with a sugar cane. But if you realise that 1 metre of sugar cane delivers 1 teaspoon of sugar, and there's approximately 10 teaspoons of refined sugar in 1 can of Coke. So if you tried to eat 10 metres of sugar cane in a day, you could not, or your jaw might break in the process. In other words, this is a highly refined drug, and that is not the way God meant us to eat it. God created the sugar cane, that's right, but it was man that extracted the refined sugar from it. So absolutely one of the contributing factors is sugar. So why is that so? Let me show you what it does. When sugar goes into the body, it basically dumps a whole lot of glucose all at once, whereas if the person was eating sugar cane, the fibre in the sugar cane, have you ever eaten sugar cane? Takes you about half an hour to get through 2 inches. So all that fibre that the glucose is locked up in, it slowly releases the glucose. But when it's all dumped in at once, you get a blood sugar level high. Goes up very high, very fast. And so when it goes up so high, fast, the brain says, overload. Pancreas, quick, release insulin. And insulin's the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose into the cell, because we've got to get it out of the blood. And by the way, diabetes mellitus means sugar in the urine. So if the body can't get all this glucose into the cell, it'll start spinning out, or spilling out into the urine. So that's what diabetes mellitus means. So what happens is the insulin's released, and high glucose demands high insulin. And so very quickly what the insulin does, it gets it out of the blood, and I'm going to show you the process in more detail in a minute, out of the blood and into several places, which gets the blood sugar level where? Down. Now it's too low, because high insulin came in response to high glucose, in fact probably a bit too much. So now it's too low, and that's why William Dufty called his book Sugar Blues. Because what does sugar cause? What was that called down there? The blues. Now we're too low. And so what does the body do when it's down there? Have a bit more sugar. have a soda drink, you call it candy, is that right? We call it lolly in Australia. Or a cup of coffee with 3 teaspoons of sugar. Will that get it up? Oh yes. But now we're up too high. More insulin, too low. Can you see this whiplash? Up, down, up, down, up, down. But there's something else that's coming in as well. And that is something that might surprise you. And it is the hybridized wheat. Wheat? America grows a lot of wheat, doesn't it? Australia grows a lot of wheat. And when I was a little girl, the wheat used to grow this high. I was in Holland a few weeks ago, and I was looking at all these fields, because Holland's very flat. I just can't I went from Holland to Italy, and that's the northern Italy's like that. It was going like from one extreme to the other. But there were huge fields, and it was a dusky, sandy-coloured crop, and it only grew maybe a foot high. I said, "What's that crop?" They said, "Wheat." What happened to the wheat? Well, it was in the 1950s, wheat went through intensive crossbreeding. They put it through intensive crossbreeding to produce a plant with a high yield of grain. This was to help in the starvation crisis in Africa, Mexico, India. So for a noble cause, one would say. And because it was just wheat, and they didn't think, how can wheat ever be harmful? It was rushed through, no safety studies. Sounds like the COVID vaccine, doesn't it? Rushed through with no safety studies.
In the 1970s, Dr. Norman Borlaug was awarded the Nobel Prize for developing a new type of wheat that yielded 6 times more grain per plant and per acre than traditional varieties. This hybrid wheat, which grew shorter with a sturdy stem, quickly gained popularity among farmers and allowed for increased productivity and profitability. By the 1990s, this wheat became the basis for many staple foods, including breads, cereals, and pasta. Consequently, high carbohydrate foods, primarily made from wheat, became prevalent in American diets. This shift has contributed to the rise in carbohydrate consumption as people opt for convenient, quick foods.
Now, all of these foods break down in the gastrointestinal tract to glucose. And once it breaks down to glucose, it's fed into the pancreas. And the pancreas, it releases insulin. Yep. Especially when you've got high glucose, as I just showed you, high glucose causes a release of high insulin. Now, the pancreas releases another hormone, and that is glucagon. And glucagon is the hormone designed to get the blood glucose levels up again. So insulin gets it down, and glucagon gets it up again. So the pancreas releases 2 main hormones, and it's designed to balance blood glucose levels. But with this high glucose release, there's a few places that insulin is released to get that glucose out of the blood. So let's have a look at the cell. And it's important to look at the cell to understand what happens here, because we are just a bunch of cells, aren't we? In fact, 100 trillion of them. And to understand how the body works, we need to know, we need to go right into the inside of the cell. I call it the CBD, Central Business District of the human body. So the glucose gets into the cell under the action of insulin. In the presence of insulin, the glucose goes into the cell. Now, the first place it will go is to the energy cycle. And it'll go into a 20-step pathway, and this 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. And isn't that why we eat? To get energy for every single cell in the body to run. Now, the chemical form of glucose that comes out of that 20-step pathway gets fed into the 8-step pathway. And the 8-step pathway delivers a very impressive 36 units of energy. So why does a 20-step pathway only give us 2 and an 8-step pathway give us 36? The difference is oxygen. This pathway uses oxygen, this pathway uses no oxygen. What a difference oxygen makes. Oh, I'm so happy to be in Idaho where you don't have to wear a mask all the time. How much oxygen are you getting when you wear a mask? I don't know whether you've read of some lung specialists who say that in the next couple of years we're going to have a lot more lung problems. God designed us to be breathing in pure air and breathing out our waste, not breathing back in our waste. And look at the ramifications of this. When people are lacking oxygen, they're actually lacking energy, which means chronic fatigue syndrome is going to start rising. Because chronic fatigue syndrome is lack of oxygen at the cellular level. Now, there can be a whole lot of reasons for that. But what I'm showing you right now is the journey of glucose. Only so much glucose can go through the energy cycles in the cell. And on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got a lot left over. And so now it is the liver that determines where it goes. The liver causes it to be stored inside the cell, particularly the muscle cell, like a little bunch of grapes. And that's called glycogen. So let's have a look at this. The first place that the glucose is sent is to the cell. The second place it is sent is to be stored as glycogen. Glycogen is a name given to quick-release glucose stores, and I believe it is one of the diabetics' best-kept secrets. And we will understand that a little bit more as I go through this. So number one, it gets sent to the cell. Number two, it gets stored as glycogen, quick-release glucose stores, already sitting in the muscle cell, just waiting to be plucked and put through the energy cycle when we need it. But we've still got a lot of glucose left over on this high carbohydrate diet. And so the third place that the glucose gets stored is the most amazing fuel depot in the human body. It's called fat cells.
Dr. Robert Atkins, renowned for his low-carb diet, made waves in the nutrition world with his best-selling book. When he began gaining weight in his late 40s and 50s, he decided to test his diet theory by eliminating carbohydrates entirely. Instead of just eating fatty foods like meat, butter and cheese, he also included 3 cups of vegetables daily to maintain digestive health. The results were striking. Atkins lost weight quickly. This happened because, without carbohydrates to provide glucose, his body had to rely on breaking down fat stores to produce the energy it needed through a process called gluconeogenesis. His liver converted fat and protein into glucose, which kept him energized and satisfied. This experiment demonstrated that cutting carbs and relying on fat for energy could effectively manage weight and boost vitality.
There's 3 things that keep the food in the stomach longer: fibre, protein and fat. Fibre because it slowly releases the glucose, protein because it's in the stomach that protein is broken down, and fat because it coats the food and takes a little bit longer to break down. It takes our stomach, on a balanced average meal, it takes 3.5 to 4 hours to digest. And then the stomach loves an hour's rest. So we should be leaving 5-6 hours between meals. But on the high carbohydrate diet, that's almost impossible because it's so deficient in protein, fibre and fat that the person's hungry all day long. And that's, of course, one of the reasons Atkins' diet was so popular. People were not hungry. After a year, Atkins noticed something. His diabetic patients were coming off their medication. This is type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Scratched his head. And as he looked at it, he realised on this low carbohydrate, high fibre, generous protein, good fats, the pancreas was getting a break. You see, when it's up, down, the pancreas is getting screamed at all day long. I'm against child abuse, I'm against animal abuse, and I'm against pancreatic abuse. That's like someone's kicking their dog every day and not realising it's hurting it. It just makes no sense at all. You know, common sense isn't very common today. It defies reason. Can you get the results that Atkins got on a vegetarian diet? You can. You absolutely can, and I will show you that. But first of all, I want to show you what they are discovering today, the effect of the wheat on our pancreas. Remember I said it was rushed through, no safety studies? what they discovered that in the hybridization of the wheat, a starch was created that is not naturally in the wheat. It's called amylopectin A. And amylopectin A gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast. Just like this. High up, high down. Let me give you something to compare it to. Let's look at amylopectin B. Amylopectin B is found in bananas and potatoes, and if you're familiar with the glycemic index of foods, that's how quickly a certain food will release glucose into the blood. And for a diabetic, the glycemic index can make a big difference. Well, bananas and potatoes are high on the glycemic index list. They release glucose quickly in. So what does your B do? Your B is not as high and not as fast and not as low. Okay? So there's your B. That's your amylopectin B. Whereas your amylopectin A, very high, very fast. What about amylopectin C? Amylopectin C is found in chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans, lentils. So there's your beans or your legumes. Now amylopectin C, let's do a green for that one, that gives, let's say this is baseline here, it gives a nice steady rise, a nice steady maintenance, and a nice steady drop. Every cell in the body desires and requires a nice steady, consistent delivery of fuel. No dramatic highs, no dramatic lows. I was talking to a scientist, he was 69. He came to one of our retreats in Alabama. He said, 20 years ago, I was told that I was pre-diabetic. And I was told that if I ate legumes every day, it would help me. He said, I did, and I do. And he said, and I never developed diabetes. I said, it was good advice. That gives a nice, steady, sure delivery of fuel. That's what every single cell in the body wants. In fact, they're calling Alzheimer's diabetes type 3. Have you heard that? And you know why? Because the organ that's affected most by these dramatic highs and lows is the brain. How's the brain up here? Bypassed. How's the brain down there? Lights are on and no one's home. The brain cells consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. So the brain particularly requires this steady, sure, consistent delivery of fuel.
What I'm about to share might surprise you, but it's the truth and you can verify it. Dr. William Davis's book, Wheat Belly, explains the changes in wheat and the impact of amylopectin, a type of starch. According to the glycemic index, which measures how quickly foods raise blood sugar levels, a baseline is 55. Foods below this number have a low glycemic index, GI, which is better for diabetics. For instance, cherries and most berries have a GI of about 25, and grapefruit is around 24, making them good choices for diabetics. In contrast, sugar has a high GI of 59, and white bread or white cereal have even higher GIs, around 69. This means a slice of white bread can raise blood sugar more than refined sugar. Many processed foods, including cereals, breads, and pastries, contain both white flour and sugar, which contributes to their high GI and addictive nature.
I'm glad you're sitting down because the next information is shocking. Whole wheat. Whole wheat bread, 72. How could whole wheat bread get the blood sugar level up higher than white bread? Because the whole wheat has fibre. Well, because it hasn't been refined, it's got more amylopectin A in it. And it's the amylopectin A that gets the blood sugar level up high and fast. Can you see that? My husband said, Barbara, what have you said? I've just got this lady saying, Barbara says white bread's better than whole wheat bread. I said, where did that come from? I think it's from here. Now, whole wheat bread has more fibre. Yes. It has more B vitamins. Yes. But in relation to blood sugar levels, no, I'm not suggesting that you buy white bread. What did that nutritionist say? The whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead. It's got almost totally deficient in nutrients, and nutrients our body needs. But you can get ancient grains today. You can get grains that have not been hybridized. You can get some wheat grains from the original wheat. In fact, the original wheat is called Enkenhorn, or sometimes I call it just Enkhorn. Enkhorn, Enkhorn. And you can also get the Emmer grain, Emmer, and that's a wild hybrid from the original Enkhorn. But probably the easiest one to buy now is spelt. One lady said, how do you spell that? Spelt. And also kamut. Kamut is another ancient grain. These grains have not been hybridized. So for the diabetic, they're the grains to use. You can get spelt pasta, you can get spelt flour, you can get many things that are made out of the spelt. So what I am doing right now is I am presenting to you my case. Presenting to you what are the things that are causing these diabetes to be out of control. And I'd like to suggest it is. In Australia, 500 new cases a day are being diagnosed. And there's been diabetes around since sugar was refined, but if you have a look at the timeline, so this hybridised wheat, hybridised in the 70s, went worldwide in the 90s, it's really since then that diabetes has just exploded. And when you understand what the hybridisation of the wheat did to the starch structure, that explains so much. Now, carbohydrates are not bad. What a relief. My husband would never forgive me if the potatoes stopped. Carbohydrates are not bad. It's only when they're overdone and refined. And for the diabetic, they need to be particularly mindful of this. So what I'd like to now is show you the role that exercise plays. What is the role that exercise plays in diabetes? It plays a major role. And the type of exercise that is the most effective is the high-intensity interval training.
High-intensity exercise is any activity that significantly raises your heart rate and makes it hard to have a conversation. Research shows that just 30 seconds of such intense exercise is enough. For example, running up a hill at full effort for 30 seconds will make your body protest and feel like it's reaching its limit. This kind of exercise is crucial because it increases blood flow to all cells, including pancreatic cells, which helps improve nutrient and oxygen delivery and waste removal. As stated in Leviticus 17:11, the life of the flesh is in the blood, meaning more blood flow equals better overall health.
It is the blood that is the healer, so anything that increases blood is going to increase healing to any part of the body. So number one, it will increase blood supply to the pancreas, starting to revive the pancreas. Number two, it will increase the ability of insulin and glucose to get into the cell. Have you heard of insulin resistance? Insulin resistance is a result of too much carbohydrate, too much glucose, to the point that the cell says, I'm sick of the sight of you. And it develops insulin resistance. So the insulin can't get in, it can't get the glucose in, so the glucose remains high, The brain sees that the glucose is still high, so it starts screaming even more at the pancreas, more insulin, and eventually the pancreas says, I'm done. I'm done. No more. So insulin resistance usually precedes diabetes. So how to turn that around is the high-intensity interval training. With high-intensity interval training, you know what the cell starts to say? More, more. Not enough, more. And then they haven't just had breakfast, so no fuel's coming. So you know what it starts to do? Pluck the glycogen stores. Remember, they're little molecules of glucose already sitting in your muscle cell. And when you start exercising, and your cell needs more fuel, it'll pluck it, put it through, pluck it, put it through, pluck it, put it through. Remember what I said, that the glycogen stores are the diabetic's best kept secret. In fact, if they've got a blood sugar level low between a meal, they don't need to take a candy or a lolly, they just need to do 30 push-ups. Get on the exercise bike. Get on the rebounder. And that'll cause a release of those. So this is what's happening in your 30 seconds high intensity. You twist it from going too much to we need more. So you know what the cell now does? It starts to develop extra insulin receptor sites. So if anyone has insulin resistance, I can tell you right now that what you'll hear today, you can turn that round in a matter of days. Isn't that good news? You can't run up hills? Exercise bike. Most of the research has been done on an exercise bike, especially for people whose hips, knees, ankles don't work very well. Then most of the weight is on the hip, and if they're a little unsteady on their feet, they're holding on, and you can go for it as fast as you can go. And then we've got recovery time. And recovery is cycling slowly. For me, it's walking down the hill. The research shows that the most effective form of recovery is not when you're sitting still. You're going to feel like doing this, but it's much better if you can do some sort of activity, but at a much lower pace. So at a much lower pace, which allows for recovery. So recovery time, your recovery time is your indicator of your fitness level. For people who are unfit, their recovery time might be 5 minutes. If your recovery time is 5 minutes, don't be concerned, because as you implement this, it's going to get less and less and less. That's good news. And it's usually done for a cycle of 6. 30 seconds high intensity, 6 recoveries. Okay, any mathematicians here? What's the maths on that? Let's be generous and say 15 minutes. How many hours in a day? 24 hours in a day. Sorry, no more excuse now that you haven't got time to exercise. If you can't quite do the 6, you do what you can. You start where you are. Dr. Al Sears, he wrote a book, PACE, and that's Progressive Acceleration of Cardiopulmonary Exertion. Progressive means this is progressive. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Acceleration, you are moving. Cardiopulmonary. Cardio strengthens the heart, as we're going to see in the next presentation. Pulmonary opens those lungs wide open. Exertion, you are exerting yourself. But what this type of exercise can do, it can help to turn diabetes around.
Wake up early tomorrow morning and give this technique a try. You might find yourself breathless at first, but that's part of the challenge. Don't be discouraged, it's all part of the process. Be gentle and patient with yourself and take the time you need to catch your breath. As you continue practicing, you'll find that your recovery time shortens and your progress accelerates. Embrace the journey and remember, every step forward is a step towards improvement.
So now let's make a list. Let's make a list of what you can do to turn diabetes around. Number 1, eliminate. If you don't turn off the tap, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner. What do we eliminate? Now, you don't have to stop the carbs, but eliminate absolutely the refined sugar. That must go. Now, for a diabetic, they're best to eliminate even maple syrup and honey initially, until their pancreas starts to work a little bit better. Eliminate the hybridized wheat. This isn't the ancient grain. This is the hybridized wheat. Caffeine must be eliminated because caffeine causes an insulin response. It tricks the body into thinking it's a crisis. Like with a person that has 3 cups of coffee a day, that's like being confronted with 3 crises a day. How would you feel? It's not long before that coffee drinker has no energy at all. So there are some things that must be eliminated. Number 2, daily exercise. And ideally, the high-intensity interval training, and you implement that as you are able. And remember, muscle knows no age. Whether you're 9 or 90, you can have strong muscles. And if you think maybe you're in your 70s, 80s, you can't quite do it, it's time to watch the documentary on 100-year-old athletes. I don't think anyone here's 100, so no excuse there. Number 3, it's absolutely vital to have adequate water. I was talking to a mother, this was in April when I was in Oklahoma. And this couple came to me and they said, our little girl is a diabetic, she's 6. They said, we don't want to feed her between meals, but we have to because her blood sugar goes too low. And I said to them, I agree, it is best to let her stomach digest the breakfast or the lunch without putting more in. So I said to them, try this. If she gets a blood sugar level low, have a little crystal of Celtic salt. Now, Celtic salt, we'll look at salt in the next lecture in more detail. It has 82 minerals in it. And those minerals, as you'll see in my next lecture, that help to get the water into the cell. Have that little bit of salt and water. They said, is that all? I said, try it. Well, I saw them the next day. They came running up to me with this huge smile on their face. They said, it worked. It worked. Because they said, we've got 2 younger children, and when they see the little 6-year-old eating between meals, they want to eat between meals, and we don't want to feed the children between meals. They were very excited. That simple thing. So water and salt. Just that little tiny crystal about as big as a sesame seed, just a very small amount. What's also important is to go for low GI foods, low glycemic index foods.
You can easily find lists of low GI foods on Google. Low GI foods provide a steady release of energy, unlike high GI foods which can cause rapid spikes in blood sugar. For example, while potatoes have a high GI, sweet potatoes have a lower GI, typically around 54 or 55. This difference is due to their fiber structures. White potatoes have a looser fiber structure, leading to quicker glucose release, whereas sweet potatoes have a tighter fiber structure, resulting in a slower, more gradual glucose release. Similarly, bananas have a high GI because of their fiber structure. Therefore, incorporating low GI foods into your diet is important for maintaining stable energy levels.
Number 5, with the diet you want low carbohydrate, so not no, but low. So does that mean that a diabetic can't eat potatoes at all? Well, instead of having 3 potatoes, have half a potato. Instead of having a whole banana on breakfast every day, maybe have half a banana every 3 days. So just a small amount. High. We want high fibre. Remember what fibre does? It slowly releases. So all your plant foods are high in fibre. Generous proteins. Now remember the proteins, your legumes, your lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, cannellini beans, and healthy fats. What are the healthy fats? I think we've got a lecture later in the week. It's called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, yeah? Fat as it come from the hand of the Creator. Basically your avocados, your nuts and your seeds. And they're two oils that have been used for thousands of years. And both of these oils are extracted from the flesh of the plant. So women could easily extract this in their kitchens. Depends where they lived. If it was in Europe, it was the olive oil. If it was in the hotter climates, it was the coconut oil. So olive oil and coconut oil, they are the better oils. So your healthy fats. So you can do the equivalent to the Atkins on a plant-based diet. Let me show you. And we're going to go to Genesis 1:29. And in Genesis 1:29, God's telling Adam and Eve what to eat. And you can't improve on the Garden of Eden diet. And what does he say? He says, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed. So what's a herb-bearing seed? A herb-bearing seed is a grain. A herb-bearing seed is a legume. A herb-bearing seed is a seed. So let's have a look at the protein content of these and the carbohydrate content. But let's have a look at the grain first. So with the grain, we've got wheat, rye, barley, oats, amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa, spelt, so many grains. Grains are high in protein, but they are high in carbohydrate. Remember our carbohydrate list? Predominantly grain. What about a legume? Lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans, soy. Soy's only a problem if it's been genetically modified. Legumes are high in protein, but they are medium to low in carbohydrate. That's what a lot of people don't realise. In fact, they are about a third the carbohydrate content that you will find in the grain. What about a seed? Pumpkin seed, sesame seed, sunflower seed, chia seed, flaxseed or linseed. Seeds are high in protein, but they are quite low in carbohydrate. So God said, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed and every tree, in the which of the tree is a fruit-bearing seed. What's a fruit-bearing seed? That's your nut. Your nut comes from the fruit of the tree. So the fruit-bearing seed is a nut, and we have so many nuts. We've got cashew, we have almond, Brazil, hazelnut, pecan, or you call them pecan, walnut. High in protein, low in carbohydrate. So adhere to the type of program that Atkins was getting incredible results with his diabetics. We need to be having high fibre, there's all your plant foods. Generous proteins, so where we're going to get our proteins, the legumes, daily legumes. And seeds and nuts.
Many people don't eat nuts regularly, but consuming a packet of cashews in one sitting is excessive. Instead, it's better to have a small handful of nuts, about 8 to 10, after each meal or use them in various dishes. Nuts and seeds provide essential nutrients like fibre, protein, and healthy fats. According to Atkins's research, fibre, proteins, and fats are crucial for our health, while carbohydrates are not essential and can be reduced. However, carbohydrates are present in all plant foods, so it's not feasible to eliminate them completely. The issue lies in the high levels of carbohydrates which contribute to diabetes.
So let me tell you the story of a man named Bobby. He came to our retreat at Alabama a few years ago. He was 62. He said to me, I have spent $1 million on my health in the last 10 years. He said, the doctors have just sent me home basically saying we can do no more for you. He came from Florida. He was a wealthy man. He said, recently they took the lymph nodes out of my groin to see if they could find out why I've got diabetes. I can't quite understand that one, but that's what happened. The reason he came to our retreat is because he met a lady at the local swimming pool where their facility is, who said, I think I know a lady that can help you. And so he came to the retreat. When he came, he was in a wheelchair because the flight had caused his legs to swell so much because of the lymph nodes that had gone. He was on 90 units of insulin a day. He'd been diagnosed as type 1 diabetic. He was on high blood pressure medication. He was on blood thinning medication. He was on blood cholesterol medication. He just spent $800 on these bandages for his legs, hoping to try and contain them. So what I did was I said to him, I'd like you to get on the rebounder for 1 minute every hour and just do this. Feet don't leave the mat, just do this. Now what it does is the rebounder stimulates the lymphatic system, and that swelling was from his lymphatic system. Now even though the nodes are gone in his groin, he's still got them in his neck, he's still got them under his arm, and that can stimulate these other lymph nodes to start to take up the slack, so to speak. I said to him, I'd like you to walk barefoot on the grass just for a few minutes, several times a day. That massages the bottom of the feet. I said, you will not be able to do the normal exercise with the other guests because we don't want you walking on those legs. He was with us for 2 weeks. Little by little, within, I think, 48 hours, those legs had gone right down. He was also having massages. Every meal, he'd say, Barbara, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Have a look at my plate. I said, yeah, it looks pretty good. You got 2 potatoes there. Why don't you just have 1? Have a bit more sweet potato. He said to me, anything you tell me, I will do. And he did. Diligently. At the end of 2 weeks, he was taking 10 units of insulin a day. Do you remember how much he was taking when he came? 90 units of insulin a day. He'd been listening to the nutritionist he went to that told him to eat whole wheat bread, whole wheat cereal, whole wheat. What's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. But he didn't know what else to do. So why does the nutritionist tell this? Why isn't what I'm telling you known? Well, how much wheat does America grow? What do they want you to eat? That's a big job to change that whole thing around. It's huge. I can't even get my mind around it when you look at the farmers and the money that they've put into that huge equipment to harvest the wheat. Oh, that's a difficult problem, isn't it? He was a very excited man when he went home. I think just in that 2 weeks, he'd lost quite a bit of weight. He'd lost about 30 pounds, and that sounds like a lot, but when you remember that the swelling in the legs, he'd lost a lot of fluid, that made up for a lot of the weight. So it's unusual for someone to use that much weight, but when you consider the swelling in his legs, it's understandable. He emailed me 3 months later. He said to me, I am off all my medication. He said, I have lost now, I think he'd lost something like 60 pounds. He said, I swim 30 laps a day. I cycle 6 miles a day. I'm on the rebounder every day. They're the only 3 types of exercise he can do. Because if he does too much on his legs because of the loss of his lymph nodes, they will swell. He will ever be managing them. But he said, I'm managing them well.
Thank you for joining me today to learn about reversing diabetes. We've covered some key strategies like cutting back on high-sugar foods, eating a low-carb diet, and incorporating high-intensity exercises into your routine. Remember, managing diabetes is a journey that takes time and effort. Regular exercise can greatly improve how your body handles sugar and boost your overall health. By making smarter food choices, staying active, and understanding how different foods and exercise affect your body, you can make a big difference in your health. If you have any questions or need more help, don't hesitate to reach out. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.